Well, let's speak now to Tamara Alrifai. She's UNRWA spokeswoman and joins us from Cairo. Tamara, as we just heard from Hani, yet another incident where Palestinians who are desperately trying to get hold of aid being shot at by Israeli forces. Why do we keep seeing this happen?
Because 90% of the population today in Gaza is facing high level of acute food insecurity. And therefore, anyone seeing a convoy of trucks, of aid trucks, going through their part of Gaza will jump on these trucks out of hunger and despair and fear, and will try to help themselves onto these convoys, especially as we're hearing more and more about children under the age of 2 now dying of hunger-related diseases and dehydration. The situation is so dire, the despair is so high, that any passage of trucks becomes an attraction to people who are hungry.
And very few trucks are actually getting through. We're hearing of the World Food Programme having its first convoy being turned away at northern Gaza, in northern Gaza, at the edge of northern Gaza. One wonders why the Israelis are stopping any aid reaching those people in the north when they so desperately need it.
Obstructions to the north have reached very, very high levels. Accessing the isolated population north of Wadi Gaza is a real challenge. More than half the requests by the UN altogether to bring much needed food, medical supplies, clean water to the north have been rejected by the Israeli authorities. We keep pushing, but it's worth remembering that today's convoy by the World Food Programme is the first attempt in 2 weeks to go to the north. UNRWA, the agency I represent, which is the largest humanitarian agency in Gaza today, has not been permitted to go to the north of Gaza since the 23rd of January. That's almost 6 weeks of us not being able to bring food and medical supplies to people who are desperate and isolated in the north of Gaza.
We're hearing from the EU that there are plans afoot for a maritime humanitarian corridor via Cyprus. What do you make of that?
The most straightforward way of getting aid into the Gaza Strip is to use the existing crossings, namely Karam Abu Salim, Karam Shalom, and Rafah from Egypt. So there are many conversations about the maritime route. There have been attempts to airdropping of aid onto the Strip, but really the most straightforward way, and this is what we at UNRWA, the largest UN agency, have been calling for, is there are existing land crossings that are much more straightforward, faster, more economical, and safer. And there are constant requests for a ceasefire that would allow an influx of humanitarian assistance. Why should we reinvent the wheel? Let us use what exists and what has worked before.
Much of UNRWA's funding has been cut off for some weeks now by a number of countries around the world. How is the organisation coping? What operations is it able to still do within Gaza?
Maintained all our much-needed humanitarian response in Gaza. Let's remember, we are responsible for people who are in our shelters. It is UNRWA that runs the shelters, that distributes food, that sends medical teams into the shelters, and we've maintained all that. We've also maintained our 700 schools across the entire region and 140 health centers, and that is thanks to donors who have not suspended their funding based on allegations. So we still have many close supporters, and we're working on providing a lot of cooperation to the reviews of our own systems that will enable us to prove once again that we are a principled UN agency and we are indispensable in the response in Gaza, but also in the region. So we're working month by month. We're maintaining our operations in March and in April, and we're truly hoping to reverse the decision by some of our donors by proving how transparent and principled we are.
Tamara Alrifai, many thanks for taking the time to join us here on Al Jazeera.